Dina, there is so much, and when I say so much, I mean a ton of interest on this one particular topic we're going to talk about today. And I feel like it is still in its infancy, not only in medicine and research, but also nutrition and exercise. This is like, it's not cutting edge anymore. Everybody has heard of this for sure. But I feel like there is so much confusion around it because we don't really know, we can't really wrap our hands around it yet because we kind of know what it is, we kind of know what it does in the body, but then we have these certain things that interact with it. So, what are we talking about today, Dee? What's now that I've kind of teed us up? What are
I
we chatting
know.
about?
Yeah, Bob. Well, we wanted to chat about GLP-1 medications,
GLP-1. Well, wait. What does that, do you know what that stands for?
glucagon-like peptide.
Holy moly, which is why we will refer to it as GLP-1 from now on.
Yes. Yes. Well, and there is another class, GLP-1 RA or receptor agonist. So,
Yep,
and I think, Bob, honestly, probably as we release this, there will be some new medication in this class that comes out because it is such
for
a
sure.
hot area for
Oh,
the
super
market
hot,
right
like
now.
on fire right now, right? And
Yeah.
I think, our intent, listeners, is not to do a deep dive into this today. We will find experts on this and we will have them on the podcast. Trust us. Today we're introducing it because we know like a lot of people are kind of dancing around GLP-1s right now, like, oh yeah, I've heard of it, or I've had a friend who has a friend and wow, they've really had great success or not such great success. So we just want to bring it out in the open. We want to have a discussion. We want to talk about maybe some of the benefits, maybe some of the negative effects. Like
Yeah.
what do we see as practicing, real life sport dietitians where GLP-1 could fit into our landscape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think what's interesting is it's really not a brand new class of medication,
Right.
right? It's been
Right.
around for quite some time and used for people with type 2 diabetes, managing glucose levels. But it's just been in the last, recent years that it's been now approved for working with obesity, overweight categories, I guess, depending on and what we'll talk about today, Bob, too, is also now maybe more an off-label use in
Mm,
terms of like for those who may not fall into an obese category as defined by insurance companies or other medical standards, and all that kind of situation is using this medication for weight loss when there may not be indication for it from a classical perspective.
right. Yeah. And that's, I think that's a hard path to follow right now because I kind of feel like there's two different routes you can take. One is the medical based prescription where yes, there is obesity, type 2 diabetes. There's an absolute need for this. And then maybe not an absolute need, but maybe a good thing to do or try or have, and that's kind of what we're going to roll in today. But I think before we start talking about the medication, D is kind of talking about what fascinated me when I first heard of GLP-1 medications coming on the market, like wildfire, a couple of years ago was well, like because we scratch our heads, right? Because we've been practicing and preaching metabolic efficiency training for over 2 decades now. And my first thought was, well, wait a second, why do we need a medication? Like GLP is a hormone that our body produces in the intestine, right? Small intestine.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why do we need a medication when you can actually activate this hormone via food intake, right? So when you are metabolically efficient, you're following a good carbohydrate to protein ratio, everything we've talked about in the past episodes, that actually activates GLP-1. But we can get into this later. Like, well, what are the nuances with activating GLP-1 via nutrition, via metabolic efficiency training? So that's kind of where my thought went first is, well, why do we have medication when we can do this through nutrition? Now, of course, I'm asking a very rhetorical question here, which, we're going to get to here in a second. Of course, we know why the medication exists, but that's, for listeners, if you're playing along with this and you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, or, wow, that's a really good point. Right. So I just wanted to tee that up first because we can influence it through food and in our food combinations for sure. But I think some people need some extra help. I think in those medical states, like you were saying, like the obese state, the type 2 diabetic state, those are very valid reasons and probably to use a medication like this, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the discovery that's happening or has been happening in the research is like the powerful effects of this medication, that for some people, food does not help the
Hmm.
same way across the board.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, like, because there's genes involved, right, Bob? So that's like
Hmm.
some things I think still to be determined further. I mean, we know from work in genetics that there definitely are genes that impact signaling up and downstream from GLP-1 hormone in gut, in brain, liver, and so on. But then there's like the impact on the brain, the
Hmm.
impact on signaling of appetite hormones, and some of the stuff that, food just doesn't work as effectively. And even just thinking of some of that, I think that phrase is food noise,
Hmm.
that some people constantly think about food, and
Hmm.
we can
Yeah.
shove a whole bunch of protein and fiber into their diet and they're still thinking about food.
Yeah.
And
Well, and the
so,
emotional
yeah,
connection to it, right? I think that's that
exactly.
food noise with the
Hmm.
emotional connection, and it's hard for a lot of us to disregard that emotional connection. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't disregard it. You should listen to it. But yeah, it's like we've got a lot of things stacked up against us when it comes to that food noise and emotional connection to food.
So I wonder, Bob, where we should go from here, especially for our audience who is active, athletic, or maybe some of
Hmm.
the people out there thinking about it, because we know athletes come in all body shapes and
Yeah.
sizes,
Yeah.
but they may not be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and
Right.
hearing more about this medication or perhaps dabbling in it already.
If we just let's just lay it out, like let's talk about potential positive benefits, potential negative effects of it in the market, in the active market, right? Let's
Hmm.
in the non-medical based market, let's put it that way, because this is real life sport nutrition podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
listen, before we say these, we should say that the literature still is in its infancy, right? It absolutely is,
mhm.
especially on active individuals of both genders. I mean, you know this better than I do, Dee, but it just seems like, I mean, there's so much research being published now in GLP-1s. We still don't have a lot of information to be able to provide real life strategies in taking these. It seems like with the people that I've seen who's using that, it seems like, I mean, talk about N of one, right? It is pure N of one right now because there are not really guidelines to follow in the active population.
A few of the things, Bob, from positive or potential health benefits here
Yeah.
and outcomes. I mean, as I was just mentioning too, that impact on appetite and feeling full, kind of reducing that. Oh, I'm thinking about food a lot, or I actually feel like I'm hungry or snacky.
Hmm.
That, it seems from anecdote and from research that's looking at mechanisms, that using the medication has a very powerful impact for many people in this very level of, just day-to-day living, is
Yeah.
that appetite regulation.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
satiety too. Like you feel fuller
Hmm.
longer, right? And
Yep.
and it's making total sense because it's I mean it's mimicking kind of what we're trying to do with food and protein and fiber and metabolic efficiency. But yeah, I mean appetite control, satiety. I mean there's even insulin sensitivity, right? So we do a lot of work with our food, controlling blood sugar, controlling insulin. So yeah, we see a lot of the potential benefits really mimicking what we've been trying to do with nutrition, right? I
Hmm.
think there are some exciting new things. I can't say that they're actually proven right now, but like lipid lowering, so lowering certain markers of cholesterol. I've heard some neuroprotective benefits, so brain. I mean, I feel like these things are starting to trickle in from the research, not knowing exactly like the mechanism yet or if it's 100% true for all people, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to see all of these byproduct positive benefits, right? Not just associated with weight loss,
Yeah.
satiety, appetite control. So I think it's kind of exciting. I mean, I'm just the science geek right now thinking,
Yeah.
wow, how many pathways is this hitting in our body, right?
Oh, I know. Yeah. Like we talk about metabolic health in many ways here
Hmm.
in the pod. And so the impact of GLP-1 medication improving metabolic health for people who maybe have this history, being on medications, athletic or not, is just like, oh, this could be a way to potentially help my situation and not need as much of this other like blood pressure med
Yeah,
or
totally.
diabetes med.
Statins, yeah,
Totally.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I told like that, I'm totally 100% on board with that. Like if someone is taking those things, because that's health, that's longevity, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, listen, yeah, if we can make a positive impact somehow with maybe replacing some of the meds, with a GLP-1, something like that, I think that has absolutely beneficial associations with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
But, here's the but. We just don't know yet, right? I mean, that's the thing. We don't know if it's going to actually lower your lipids or help with blood pressure. Like, we know it can. I'm always like, we'll get into the potential negative effects here in a second. But yeah, I'm super excited for maybe potentially having the impact, the positive impact on improving longevity markers. And that gets me pretty excited because, we're active for our lifetime, and hopefully we're going to expand and kind of prolong our health span and being active longer, and not just kind of succumbing to sitting in a chair the rest of our lives once we hit 70 or 80 or whatever it is, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like this could be a very positive tool when implemented correctly and for the right reasons. That's from a health perspective, right?
Yes.
Because now we need to talk about the other side of it, because we're talking about an active population. So what do we know about the performance side of it? So, athletes are starting to take this, and is there anything supporting taking GLP-1 medications and performance?
I mean, I wonder, some of this I don't know that we can say is direct cause and effect, but
Yeah.
it's that thing, well, if it affects my metabolic health and my body mass and those sorts of things, how does that translate to me being a better performer, being able to actually exercise more because I have perhaps less joint pain. I have a little bit more motivation. Maybe I'm not thinking about food as much, and those thoughts go towards, being able to be more active.
Yeah.
But a lot of this, I don't think we have, in our research yet, Bob. Like, this is what we have seen from a very rigid, robust research study.
Yeah, definitely not cause and effect yet. And you can argue, like, okay, if you lose weight, maybe the runner who loses weight is going to get faster in their race. Well, maybe, right? But again,
Yeah.
cause and effect, very hard to determine that, right?
Right, right.
I would say it could also be from a psychological standpoint. Like if someone loses weight, what happens? Well, they feel good about themselves, their self-confidence goes up, which means their outlook on life is a little more positive. So maybe that's part of it. I mean, obviously I'm not deterring away from the physiological benefits of, being faster, but what I'm saying is just by losing weight doesn't necessarily mean you're going to run faster, right? And honestly, depending on the type of sport that's being done, that could actually be a detriment, right? If you lose weight or too much weight, because we know in certain sports, buoyancy is also important. But here's the other thing, as maybe kind of we're getting into the potential negative effects, is if you lose too much weight, now we're talking about potential negative effects. So maybe you're not eating as much. Maybe you're set up for slower recovery. I hear that all the
Yeah.
time, Dee, by the way. Like when athletes say, oh, you know what? I feel like I didn't eat as much and I'm not recovering as fast, right? So they're in low energy availability. They're not recovering as fast. So I don't know. I feel like that could be part of this also in the future. We don't know yet, right? This is purely anecdotal, but
Yeah.
some things to think about too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to consider both sides of the coin here.
Yeah.
And while we might be attracted to the weight loss part, or like those last 4 pounds, or 8 pounds, or 21 pounds, whatever it
Yeah.
is for each person, is really thinking diligently about the potential negatives. And we're not trying to be fear mongering, Bob. It's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
oh, from some of the people we have worked with, and also knowing we don't have any kind of randomized control trial from the research in athletic population, but you can kind of just logically think through this from people who athletes who have intentionally or unintentionally underfueled, because this medication does turn down your appetite.
Right.
It's
Right.
it
Yeah.
For most people, we're cutting a bunch of calories, whether
Yeah.
that's 20% or 40% of your calories. It can be a huge number.
Right.
And then all those downstream consequences, like you were mentioning, low energy availability and relative energy deficiency, those consequences related to poor recovery, fatigue. Like, are we going to be able to become more fit and strong if we can't fuel the body?
It's a good point, because then maybe you don't have enough fuel for proper physiological adaptation. So see,
Yeah.
this is a Pandora's box, D. It really is, because we just don't know yet, right? And I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about here, is like, we're not going to give you listeners, what you should do, because it's so new, right? But I feel like talking through this maybe identify some things you need to really, if you're thinking about a GLP-1, taking a GLP-1, maybe thinking about what we're talking about here, and weighing the pros and cons, right? Because I was also kind of thinking about this too, and like, well, yeah, there could be some positives, there could be some negatives. I think, even performance wise, if we're looking at that, is, you mentioned not eating enough calories potentially, because this will signal your body not to, or to be to have a higher rate of satiety. You might be underfueled. So what if you
Yeah.
go into a practice or a session, and maybe we've all been underfueled during training, right? But maybe you're on the trails, maybe you're on a technical trail, and you really need a lot of mental functioning and focus and cognitive, just awareness. And what if you're underfueled and your brain is underfueled? And what if you take a dive? I mean, what it could happen anywhere, anytime. You can't blame this. You can't put fingers on it. But what I'm saying is, being underfueled consistently can be of major concern from a performance standpoint, but also from an injury risk standpoint. And that's one of the things I'm very concerned with, because I work with a lot of athletes who are underfueled, could really, really impact negatively their performance and their recovery. Wait a second, I just thought of something. If I'm taking this and I'm not as hungry, that means I'm not eating as much food, right, Dee?
Yeah.
I mean, potentially, right? So if I'm
Right.
not eating as much food, potentially, right? I might not eat as many nutrients, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
we could probably make that argument.
You're bringing up another important area here, Bob, that is very legitimate, right? Is like lower calories. What comprises those calories? Let alone are we meeting our needs for basic, adequate living?
Right.
But if we're trying to improve fitness, train for a race, just thrive a little more,
Yeah.
also is what's happening under all of the calories, is like,
Right.
are we getting in sufficient B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, all the things beyond just macronutrients?
Yeah.
And so I think that's legitimate. And then how that could eventually, over time, affect performance. We may not experience it in the short term, but it's going to linger there and somehow at some point be on our radar in the relatively near future.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
not,
it's very similar when I work with athletes who go through fasting protocols. I tell them the same
yeah,
thing, and
yeah.
I feel like fasting protocols, and probably this, taking this medication, it should be supervised, absolutely, because there is risk for some nutrient deficiencies, especially if continued long term, right?
Yeah,
So that I would just throw that out there, like, wow, we might be missing some of those
yeah.
micronutrients that could be important, right?
And maybe some of this has to do with the dosing, Bob,
True,
because if
true.
you're working with a physician, which everyone should be, if
Yep.
they're considering going on a GLP, or maybe you ordered it off the internet,
Yeah.
it's never too late to work with a physician and a dietitian. But I'm just thinking of, like, you got to find that proper dose where you don't have as high of negative side effect. I mean, you can hear and Google these stories like, oh, my doctor started on me on this high dose and I had nausea, constipation. I couldn't eat for 3 days. And that's
GI
just,
issues now.
yeah, the GI issues are pretty serious. So I think some of that, like, we're not trying to be doom and gloom, but it does speak to sufficient assessment with a physician and blood work and these things so that your baseline and you can kind of monitor your
Yeah.
your progression.
Yeah. I'm gonna say this, and kind of tongue in cheek, but listeners, I want you to hear this, because I read this quote from a cardiologist regarding these GLP-1 meds, And this cardiologist said, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, so please pardon me, but he basically said, listen, I've been a cardiologist for decades, and I've counseled my patients with diet and exercise, and I've incorporated registered dietitians when appropriate, and most of my patients had very, very little success. But when I started prescribing GLP-1s, I found immediate success in these patients. What he also said was, it's too soon to tell what the long-term benefits or kind of detriments will be. But initially, this is a cardiologist, saying, wow, this is actually very beneficial when used appropriately. I'm saying that to basically confirm what you just said, Dee. I would not be comfortable with anyone using these without working with a very trusted physician, right? Who's kind of overseeing this whole thing, because there's so many things that can go wrong. We mentioned some things like nutrient deficiencies, GI issues, underfueling, fatigue, slow recovery. I just feel like there's so many things that can go wrong. This isn't like hey, should I take creatine, right? This is like, in my mind, Dee, like I think of like food, supplements, medications, right? You can kind of play around with food and supplements, kind of like food. Yeah, maybe your gut gets a little disturbed and you have some GI distress. Supplements, yeah, it gets a little scarier, like if you start experimenting with that on your own. But medications, if you do that on your own and start experimenting, I think that could go wrong very quickly. And that would be one of my takeaways is please use a physician if you are thinking about taking these. Don't just order off the internet. Don't just play around with this stuff. Don't just microdose. And I mean, I get the whole N of one. I do that all the time, but I kind of feel like it's a little more serious when you talk about medications versus food and supplements. Yeah. That's just my take on it. Yeah. And there's a big one I think we should maybe put in here too, because you and I are, we're both in our 5th decade. We're both trying to improve our muscle mass, muscle functioning. What do we know about GLP-1s and muscle?
This is another area, Bob, that needs attention, is the loss of skeletal muscle mass, maybe function, or what's happening. So not only to the mass of muscle as we're aging, we lose muscle mass, muscle function anyway.
Yeah.
And we try our best through our other modalities like strength and resistance training and higher protein and, some of these other things we've talked about in many episodes. But some of the research suggesting like 20 to 40% muscle loss. As you lose fat, you're also losing muscle. I think some of that, like the statistics I see, are kind of like, well, we didn't control for this.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's significant enough for some people to be noteworthy here.
Yeah.
Especially for our listener base.
Yeah. Which you got, it's all about context, right?
Yeah.
If you really look at it. So if you have someone who's obese and really need to lose weight for health, okay, if you're going to lose some muscle mass, okay, like that's part of it. Like, let's get down to a good body weight that's going to affect your health positively, maybe get you off some other medications. Totally get that. When you're talking about more of an athletic person who's like, oh, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds, but then there's a risk of losing 20% of your muscle mass. Like, I don't know. I think we have to weigh those things, right? I think we have to put that in context first. And like anything we do, we always have to ask the why. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Why are we trying to do this? How are we going to do this? But I do feel like this is kind of where the physician comes into play. And hopefully you would also incorporate a performance dietitian, because I'm even thinking like some of the athletes I've helped in the past who are weight class athletes, so they've got to cut weight. I'm like, oh my God, the last thing you would want is to lose muscle mass when you're trying to weight cut. So, potentially we see GLP-1 medications coming in the weight class sports. Who knows, right? But it's a very delicate dance there, because we don't want to lose a lot of muscle mass. But again, putting it in a context, I get if you're obese and need to get the weight down. Absolutely. Totally get that. Totally support that. But if you're not in that category, I think it could be quite, I don't want to say dangerous, although maybe I should say dangerous, because, one of the longevity factors that is being looked at is muscle mass, muscle functioning, grip strength, like all these things that are related to muscle. So why would you want to compromise that, right? When we know after the age of 40-ish, we're already starting to lose muscle mass. right? So,
Yeah.
which kind of leads me to this whole thing. I've seen fitness centers like health club chains and stuff, D, where they actually, I don't know if you've seen this, but they are marketing GLP-1 training programs
Yeah.
because they know that potentially there might be some muscle mass loss with people who are taking GLP-1 meds. So they're actually prescribing a training program to help slow that muscle mass loss.
Yeah.
My argument with for this whole thing, D. I mean, obviously, you kind of know what my argument's going to be. I mean, strength training is important no matter who you are, how old you are, what you do. I don't care what it is. You need to move some heavy stuff, right? It doesn't have to be lifting weights necessarily, but you need to get moving something heavy because, and that's just common sense for longevity.
Well, yeah, and that makes me think of the long-term use of the medication because what I think hasn't been figured out conclusively is what happens when you stop the medication, right?
Right,
And
right.
so I think you're just speaking also to like the other habits that need to be in place,
Yeah.
whether you're on the medication or not, but especially if you're on the medication. I mean, I would say especially for anyone, we have to have our our dietary pattern should be optimized. And we need to have resistance strength training, all of that in place, depending on who you are, your starting point, where you're at, what your goals are. If you're starting this medication and you don't want to use it long term, maybe for financial reasons or whatever the situation is, really keeping in mind that those other to dos that need to be in place for the long haul.
Yeah. And Dina, I don't know the answer to this question, which is why I'm going to ask you. Is there a set time period to be on GLP-1 meds? Or has that been established yet?
I think I've heard like at least 3 to 6 months
Okay.
to kind of figure out the dosing
Okay.
and how it's working for you.
Yeah. But then, yeah, to your point, what happens after 6 months? Like,
Yeah,
do you go off of it? And if you do, like, if you
I
lost
know.
weight, does the weight come back?
Yeah,
Is like, what happens to the muscle? Like, I don't know. All these questions are going through my head. Like, well, what happens next? Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
like,
think,
yeah.
I think we'll hear, and I have been hearing from both sides, like
Yeah.
a physician who says, actually, not all people gain fat back. And, it's not all like everything gets reversed when you stop. And then I have seen some physicians saying, and some indication from research, like you may gain like most of your fat back and it's going to be harder. So I don't know. It's like scary both ways. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what's true. So
Yeah.
that's where we need more research here on the long term.
Totally agree. You
But
know what else is scary? Is just aging, isn't it?
oh, I know.
Like, sorry for our younger listeners, but seriously, like we all gain like literally, we all gain body fat, we all lose muscle. It's like we've got to factor in all of these things as we age. So I
Yeah.
guess kind of what I'm getting at too is you have to decide what's right for you, obviously, right? For what's right for me is going to be not right for you and your friend and your family. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
for me, I will do everything possible from a food and an exercise perspective to just try to slow this biology of aging. Not going crazy like, Brian Johnson, Blueprint Diet, that guy that's spending like $2
Yeah.
million a year. Okay, you got the money, do it, right? I get it, but not going to that extreme. But maybe, let me throw it out there. Maybe there's another extreme that's not an extreme. It's just the next step in your life to say, hey, you know what? I haven't tried lifting weights for a few years. Maybe I should try that again. Like maybe you just do something like that first, just to see how you feel and how your body responds. Oh, hey, maybe I should increase my protein intake. Like what I'm saying is maybe start small before you just jump right into a medication, right? I would say the same thing about a supplement too, D. Like why don't you try eating some iron rich foods before taking an iron supplement if your blood work suggested that you need iron? Like, it's like the logical thing in my mind. Unfortunately, we do have that instant gratification response in our brains as human beings, though,
Yeah.
and we all
Well,
have it.
and we're certainly not trying to discount those with lived experience. Like they
Oh
have
yeah.
tried everything
Oh,
and they're
totally, totally.
into this and are like, oh, finally, I have a solution.
Yeah,
That is amazing.
yeah,
I was
and
just thinking of something, Bob, because how the World Anti Doping
Oh
Like the
yeah. Yeah.
list of
Mm-hmm.
prohibited pharmaceuticals and banned substances and everything, and like where this falls, because I think, to my knowledge, the semaglutide, the GLP-1, is like on the monitored
Mm-hmm.
list right now. They haven't
Mm-hmm.
decided if this is
Yep.
gonna go against
Yep.
the, so that just brings another layer of like, oh, for some people who are just, yeah, using
Yeah.
this maybe for the performance enhancement
Right. So now you're
benefit.
talking about collegiate athletes,
Yeah.
professional, elite,
Uh-huh.
Olympians. You know, if you were to ask me if it's going to make the WADA list, I would say yes, it will in the near future
I think so
because
too.
it can really turn the tides very quickly,
Yeah.
I feel, from what
Yeah.
I've been seeing. Yeah.
Well, and there's
Yeah.
several other hormones that are
Oh yeah,
prohibited,
right?
so
Right?
it's
Yeah,
probably going to
totally.
be right on the
Totally.
list. So,
I mean, I don't know, Dee. I think I want to reiterate what you said. Like in my summary, I would say, listen, this could be a potential benefit for some people. Absolutely, GLP-1 meds. But what I would say is, and again, it's not discounting. Listen, because I've worked with people like this. Like they're like, man, I've tried everything nutritionally. I've tried everything exercise. I've tried everything. If you have, then fantastic. If this is the next step, do it, but under supervision of a physician who knows what they're doing, because I just don't want anyone just going out and buying on the internet and saying, hey, I'm going to do this dose today and do this dose today,
yeah.
because I feel like that could be potentially dangerous, right?
Mm.
And but what it also does is it extends your learning curve, so now it takes longer to figure out if it's working for you or not. And I would hate for someone to have any of the negative implications, the GI stuff, the major muscle mass loss. I mean, I would just want whoever's doing it to do it right and supervised. That would be my ending summary from this.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought one other thing we didn't talk about is bone
Yeah.
health. Is
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
else? We just don't have a ton of info. So,
Right.
the proper assessment, monitoring, including bone scan, blood work,
Right, right.
dietary assessment, working with a trainer to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that the strength training you are doing is proper for you,
Yep.
etc. I mean,
Yep.
this is stuff everybody should do, right,
Yeah,
Bob?
for
So,
sure. For sure.
should is a careful word here to
Yeah.
use. But anyway, I think this is good to just have these conversations and try and destigmatize it as we learn more from the science and from each other so that we can support and figure out paths forward for each
Yeah.
person.
And speaking of that, with the conversations, I feel like we should probably light up our Patreon account, right? So maybe
Yeah.
everyone head on over to patreon.com/ISN podcast and let's have some discussions on this. Like, have you tried GLP-1s? What do you know? Have you have friends? I feel like the more interactive we can be, the more
Yeah.
information we all can take away from that to determine maybe what the next step is. And when you visit our Patreon account, just you can easily join our free community, right? Join there. It's where we interact with everybody. We do have 2 paid memberships, also monthly memberships. They're a couple dollars a month, literally. As everyone knows, we are a non-sponsored podcast, so we do not accept any money from anyone. So the levels, the silver and gold level over at Patreon, just allows us to kind of keep the doors open and keep our podcast running without any bias. So definitely head on over to there so we can kind of get the discussion continued here.
Well, Bob, with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode. We definitely would love to hear your input, as Bob was saying, over on our Patreon community. Much appreciated, and really appreciate you listening in to this episode. We look forward to meeting up with you on the next one.